Yeah, I'd like to give the committee an update on the two open actions. That's okay. Neil Harmon, the head of the RPMO for the City Region deal. Yeah, so as submitted as part of agenda item 4 is the role in action log for the Joint Committee. There are two open actions currently. Open action number 1 is the requirement to share our funding report. Just wanted to give the committee an update on this. The CRD funding detail held within the report is 100% validated. We're in the final stages of doing the final validation checks on partner and leverage funding data as well. On the university side, we're also ensuring what lines of the data may be underpinned by contracts and therefore need to be treated as private and confidential to ensure appropriate handling of the report and its underpinning data. Fortunately, it wasn't ready in time for the June Joint Committee, but once these checks have concluded, the report will be ready for distribution to Joint Committee. Chief Officer Group have advised that this should be added as an agenda item to the September Joint Committee forward plan, which it isn't showing on. We're going to come on to talk about that in a moment. So if content, we're happy to include that for the forward look for September. In terms of the other open action, number 11, this is the requirement for Chief Officer Group and the RPMO to include the most suitable solution to Joint Committee's request for greater transparency. This action currently remains open and discussions have progressed at Chief Officer Group meeting on the 16th of June, which was 2 days ago. And I'm happy for Chief Officers to give an update on that if they want to. But that was the two actions I wanted to cover today. Thank you.
Okay, is there any update then from the Chief Officers Group? So was it important? Sorry, Brian.
You're listening. You're putting it in my glasses over.
Thanks, Chair. Brian Roberts, Chief Executive of Stirling Council and the current Chair of the Group. So just on both those actions, as Neil said, the first one in the finance report, what also asked is that that's shared with committee members as soon as it's ready. We've obviously noted that it needs to come to the next committee, but we want the committee to see that now. Literally, it will be maybe a week or so at most, and then it will be circulated. So I'm pleased that's the plan of we'll have so to say, and then it will be formally reported back into the public domain. Key points that Neil highlighted here is double checking the leverage and making sure that the leverage chair that we bring forward can justifiably be used as leverage to the deal. What we don't want to do is be trying to insinuate other economic that's not strictly aligned to it. So we've done a catch-all across the whole area. And then the final point, as Neil said, in the relation to the university contracts, is making sure that information can be released. Any information that can't be released in the public domain could then obviously be released subject to checking the plan, sorry, the university on the conditions of those contracts. The expectation is that everything that can be shared is shared with partners, because some of that might be public, some of it might be effectively private. Pink paper, as we would refer to it, still in. And on the second, the dashboard, we've seen the completion targets for December to align with the order. The work is already underway, as Neil said, and certainly I would anticipate that coming back probably to the next committee rather than the week of December. The deadlines are aligned with the audit actions.
Thank you. Does any committee members have any questions on any of those two items? Oh, Lee?
I've got a question. It's not on those two items, it's on closed item 10.
Yeah.
I'd just like to understand the phrases moved items to balance load. Is that load on RPMO or pursued load on joint committee or something else?
Load in the fullest sense, the CRD partnership, the Joint Committee, all things being taken into account to create less of a bottleneck for the activity and to ensure that we don't have too much coming forward in the one cycle. So not RPMO, just to be clear.
Sorry, so it's not RPMO and it's not joint committee, because I don't feel we're getting a lot of things through to these meetings, then what's the issue? What's being pushed and why?
To clarify, the action originally came about because a joint committee noted that there was too much on the forward look for this joint committee. So COG were taking the action to reduce the burden for this joint committee, which we did.
I'll have one more go. But if you look at what's on the joint committee for today, there's very little really on this committee, and the last meeting, there's very little on the last meeting as well. One of the things we know, the flow through this committee and from the spend for this deal hasn't been where we'd like it to be. So I'm interested to know why we end up with relatively light meetings. And I don't think they should point to the joint committee or the members. I'm talking out of turn. It's about the ability to read stuff, to do the work.
Absolutely recognise the point that you're making. I wonder whether it was worth having a more detailed discussion of that on the forward plan, because I think part of the issue that we've got is that when we're looking at the forward plan, we think about how do we manage the upcoming agendas, and then invariably there's been slip. So as you rightly say, you look at the meetings that we've had, they're live. If we go back probably 6 months before that, we were anticipating those meetings being quite big business cases going to so there's no doubt that there's some of those business cases. There are a couple of things that I want to pick up under the forward action plan under that item. So I don't know if you want to bring to that point, Chair, or whether you want to raise them.
Recognise that actually, because we do look at the forward plan, I think that's going to be a heavy meeting, spread it out, then things fall off the agenda and it ends up being a light meeting, so we maybe need to be a bit more fleet of foot to put things back on. You can pick that up. There was a question I had on the action log. When does something come off the action log? Because I'm noticing that there's been things on there that have been closed for a year. Should they come off just to kind of tidy it up a little bit?
Yeah, we welcome that feedback. At the moment, the process has been that we've retained everything for transparency, but we're happy to take aged items out of it and only keep items that have closed in the preceding quarter on there for continuity, if that's okay.
And we can always go back to previous, kind of papers if we want to see anything else. Yeah.
If there's no more questions then on the rolling action law,
Sorry. There's no more questions on the rolling action log. We can move on to the next item, which is the forward plan.
Brian, do you want me to do my part and then you can come in? Yeah. Okay. So just looking at the forward plan for Q2 and the currently scheduled September joint committee, you'll notice we have split the forward plan to give committee members a bit more clarity about briefings that may emerge, using your phrase, slight in the periods between the joint committee schedule itself, and then the potential for any further meetings if the committee deem them necessary. We have, for transparency, added a couple of emergent placeholders for the activity between meetings at the top of the report, which aims to increase the routine engagement with joint committee members on active CRD topics, and we will be in touch with committee members in relation to this informal engagement in due course. In terms of the next formal meeting, as I say, that's currently scheduled for the 17th of September, we have a number of items currently scheduled, but we are, as we've just covered, some ways out from this committee meeting, and as such, it is subject to change, particularly when it comes to our CRD delivery core items, such as business case collateral. But there are a couple of key operational items that we're expecting: the previously mentioned formal appearance of the funding, a potential item on opportunities that exist within the remainder of the portfolio, an item in relation to benefit realisation dashboard, which everyone's keen to appear at a joint committee. In terms of that core CRD delivery items, we've got an update potentially on the CHT programme on the overall delivery. The active travel business case or business justification cases for the 2 travel routes, and the CHT OBC for Hallowa Heritage and Enterprise Centre that members may remember an update from Kevin Wells at a previous joint committee. I wasn't planning to go into the January forward look, but just to highlight that all the due dates on the audit report, which is an agenda item later today. All the current action plan dates are anticipated to have concluded by the January joint committee, and therefore a formal update will be expected then. I know in terms of the September joint committee, Chief Officer Group have noted that there is a gap from September to January, and they were discussing the viability of that gap, considering the delivery portfolio. I think Brian wants to make a couple of comments on that.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Neil. Yeah, so as the committee are aware, and picking up on your point, about the scale of it. The challenges of this year, other conversations, other potential reasons.
And you know what, you've got the dodgy mic, so you slow that one. There's one, it's like a lottery, whoever gets it, you know, it just doesn't work out, so.
Yeah, thanks for getting the budget, mate. Is that better? Yeah. Okay, so I'll start from the beginning again. So COGS were reviewing the forward plans, as Neil said, there's one in September, one in January. So that really only leaves 2 committee cycles before the end of the financial year, 2 committee cycles before the next local election. And because of that election process, there will be a gap between effectively the end of March and potentially the end of June, depending on how long it takes the new councils to elect people onto it, etc., etc. So what we've been reviewing is COGS. First of all, is 2 committees for the rest of this financial year after this one enough? We don't think it is because of the scale of business to go through. The second bit we've been reviewing, and it gets back to your earlier point, Lee, is if we need more, is the cycle and frequency and the dates that's in there right now. We don't have those answers for you today, as in, do we want to move September back by 2 or 3 weeks? Do we want to put an extra one in the beginning of December? But what we're reviewing is the likelihood of these landing. There are some significant projects in there that need to come forward within that time frame. So the elements that are in quarter 2 for the September date do not envisage those slipping back into a January or February or a March committee, but it's whether they will land for a September one. So what we're looking for is agreement from joint committee that we go over the next couple of weeks and then by circulation suggest a profile across all these, including the conversation that we'll have to have on any reset projects, but also, Chair, layer that over not just with the committee meetings but with briefings on these, because I think what we're realising collectively is that the value in the briefings is something that we've missed over the last few years. You just need to look at the discussion we had in this chamber last week. Those types of discussions are long overdue, so we need to build them in as well. So absolutely committed to bring everything that's there forward, but just recognising that those dates probably aren't optimum dates, and that we feel that we need more than 2 committee cycles to do the scale of the activity and the scale of the papers that will come here justice.
Yeah, for me, I think that makes sense. And given how busy everybody's diaries are, it's better to get dates in the diary, whether we're going to use them or not, as long as somebody looks at them far enough ahead and cancels them out if not needed. So that we're not expecting anything. But if there's not going to be formal committees, I'm sure there could be briefing sessions put in place. That even sometimes just a chat is good on an informal basis. So we're good to get them in the diary moving forward. But I don't know if anyone else has got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. The one caveat on this is, you've got 9 CRD delivery cases, business justification cases, and some full outline cases as well. has the RPMO done an assessment as to how realistic it is that we will actually get these? Because they have a tendency to slip. So how certain are you about these dates and whether they will actually hit those committees at the right time? Because some of them, you must be in a fairly advanced position to be able to get it before us.
I'll happily defer some of this to partners, but there is definitely an assessment that's undertaken by the RPMO, and we have our own internal RAG status that we apply to all the in-flight business cases and collateral. We're taking into account past precedents, the likelihood of achieving government endorsement, where we think that will land, how complete we are today, the kind of moving landscape that is the government and their feedback, which sometimes can be different in each cycle. It's a challenge to accurately predict. We're not going to shy away from that fact, and it is difficult because we're trying to balance and accept the aspirations of the delivery teams to deliver within certain time windows and financial years, for that matter, in the profile. So partners probably agree that RPMO do challenge them on this regularly, and it's a best attempt to articulate, I would say, generally as a sliding scale, the further out, so the quarter beyond the next, absolutely there's a diminishing return to how viable those are at this stage in terms of assessment. As Brian says, everyone's committed to delivering them within the period. But until we reach the hurdle of government, for example, it's a kind of unknown quantity and very much depends on the individual policy areas, how long they're taking, how comprehensive they're going to be. We have instances where we go back and forth 10 times on one business case with government. So it is a very difficult thing, unfortunately, to predict. But we do our best to reflect real world. In fact, some of the changes you see in this current forward plan were a result of that challenge with the partners. But I'm happy to defer to partners if they've anything they want to add.
I think I got dodgy mic as well. I think I understand. I mean, obviously the partners will have seen this, and I'm sure they're all eminently defensible. It's more that thing of I'm quite happy to have more meetings or what have you, but only if there's something substantive to talk about. Because I'm just aware of the fact that here we are, we've got a meeting today, and you know, like there's an audit which is really important for us to discuss. But you know, like I remember the conversation about, it looks like the June meeting might be a bit heavy, so we better move some stuff. And that was because there were business cases to consider there, not because of the audit. So I would be concerned about scheduling more meetings unless we had some level of confidence that there was going to be business for those meetings. Because I take your point, Ellen, that, you know, like we can always cancel them, but, you know, there will be other, so we don't want to say insubstantial, but there will be other less substantive matters that will need to be discussed at those, and then we'll end up having to trip through and sit down and, you know, an entire afternoon out listening to me drone on about nonsense. So it is quite important that we have a good idea about how confident we are that these matters will hit these agendas at these times.
Right.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that point. I completely agree with the point that you're making. We need to be able to give that assurance. Everything that's on the page in front of you needs to be delivered by the end of this financial year. Notwithstanding the conversation we had last week, and there may be an impact on some of those. Even that impact needs to come forward for a decision of this committee. So there's things that need to go in this forward plan, you know, off the back of last week's discussion that still need to be worked through, probably through another couple of briefings. If you look at the CHD programme as a perfect area example, we agreed in this very room, actually, what must have been there nearly 18 months ago, the projects that would be progressed and the timelines for doing that. Now, the realistic assessment of the work that still needs to be done on securing the leverage and the match funding, etc., is that we're anticipating them coming forward in Q3. But you'll notice that we've added in an update on the whole CHT because we feel it's getting too long between when they were going to come forward when they will come forward to leave that void. So an update on all the programme and the work that's been done in each of them, wherein the business cases follow through. There is a potential that some of those business cases will be ready before December, but they won't be ready for September. So that comes back to the earlier point, Chair, around we need to do a little bit of deep dive into these areas and understand, would they be ready for a committee if we had an extra one in November? So do we decide that we're going to put the September one back so that these all land and use the September time for more briefings on some of the reset or other elements as well? So what we're really asking committee for, and I appreciate this is verbal rather than written down, is a bit of space over the next couple of weeks to then do by circulation what we see as the programme for the remaining 6 months of the year, with suggestions of firm committee cycle dates that we would commit to those programmes coming forward, but also a range of briefings that would sit alongside those so that we get through the business we need. But absolutely take Councillor Benny's point.
Yeah, but Susan and then Jerry wants to come in on this as well.
Hi, thanks. I think I hear what everybody's saying, and it's annoying having meetings if you don't need them, but I think given what you've just explained about the government's taking a while, I think the more planning we can do, the more work we get. So I'm totally agreeing with briefings are a good way to go. And if I have the meetings in the diary, then just now before our diaries get all full, it's far easier to cancel them than try and create a meeting when everybody's busy, and then it's moved and moved and moved. We've all been in situations like that. And I think if we can do everything that we can, planning wise and you know, preparing ourselves, getting everything as ready as we can before. So I would be quite agreeable to extra meetings being put in but cancelled in plenty of time if we don't need them.
Probably need to get a definition of what plenty time is. And now,
Sorry, Martha, I was because we probably need a definition of what plenty time is, because
The committee meetings, whether they're be land. In fact, to be perfectly honest, we're probably over 6 weeks out. So if that's an area that certainly the committee, then we can commit to doing that. What I wouldn't want to be doing is messing the committee about chopping and changing meetings. So if we put them in, we have that, then we'll go to that.
okay, fair enough, Jerry.
Thank you very much, Chair. Actually, both yourself and Neil have identified two very important elements here. One has been fleet food, and the other is what's beyond our control. And I think there is a place where we're arriving at now, whereby if we have, even with Brian's identification of the publication dates of papers, etc., we have an opportunity to do that. I think there will be consensus around the room that there is a position we're in, which is not helpful in actually moving forward within the very time constraints that we're facing. So I think it's really important for the confidence of the work that was undertaken here, the realisation of the projects, and indeed the conversations that need to take place prior to that with regard, and I know my colleague here majors on this, and benefit realisation. Those things really are going to be very much contingent upon being available to respond as soon as possible, given that. So I think we're finding a place of consensus whereby we're agreeable to ensuring that we can do all that we possibly can to minimise the risk of any further delays.
Thanks, Jerry. So I think we're agreed. Well,
I was just going to say, Chair, Lee, if that answers the point that you raised earlier, or if there's anything else that you wanted to ask us in relation to.
Thank you. I suppose from my, if I look at that forward lead, I look at the time, think about the priorities, and I think about bits of the audit report, then the reset and the benefits realisation are really urgent to get those as a matter of priority. I hate to think we haven't got those by next September. There's also the audit report, the issue about status of programs and projects. I'd like to see that as a whole item. I think the audit report says it. So again, I think it's really important so we can understand the forward. Look, I am interested in your 6 weeks, Brian, because that implies that by the end of July, we will know whether or not the business cases and the rest are coming through for September. So we'll know that already. And by September 17th, we will know whether or not anything for a meeting at the end of beginning of November would be feasible or not be feasible. It's that sort of thing I think we need to build into an understanding of my point of view. But in my hierarchy here, I think the reset with benefits realisation of the absolute key best to some of it. Because they're more in our control, I think, than the business cases might be, and this is the public government's one. But if you get them all together for September, we could take them all.
Big sandwiches.
Yep, that seems the way forward. So I think we've got consensus here. Can I ask, I appreciate quarter four's not on here. Joint committees raised a number of times that we would like added to a committee meeting the opportunity to talk about the annual conversation and the annual report. So quarter four is probably an ideal time for that to be added, just to make sure that it's on the agenda and that we've got the opportunity to discuss it ahead of it going anywhere or
Yeah, absolutely. The only reason quarter four is not shown here is because we didn't have any business cases scheduled for the reasons Brian says they have to be done in advance for this financial year. But yeah, absolutely, that's something we can add, and because we have agreed that some proprietary conversations are necessary for the annual conversation with joint committee members, so we will add that to quarter four cycle.
Okay, we're all happy in that item. We can move on then to
sorry, Martha. We can move on then to item 5.1, which is the audit report and action plan. Neil?
Thank you. Yeah, so apologies for the slight confusion on the appearance of the documents. This is looking at, in combination, the urgent business item that was added today in relation to the CRD audit report itself from the 27th of March. And in addition to that, the updated action plan dated June. We're looking for the formal appearance and approval of the audit report itself and noting of the updated action since. You may remember that briefing where the original report findings were shared with members in March, and this is the first joint committee, formal joint committee since then. So hence why you've been asked to formally consider the report and its findings. For the avoidance of doubt, the report and its recommendations have not changed since the March briefing. However, following feedback at that briefing in March, the action plan has been updated, as I've said, and that was approved by COG in the week since and is being presented today for member information as part of the Agenda 5.1. I should point out as well that audit colleagues are online for any operational questions in relation to the audit itself. RPMO presenting their report, so we can answer questions on the report itself. I'm looking for Chair to give me a bit of steer on how you want to walk through this. I'm conscious that there are a number of points within the report itself, and then the individual recommendations and the subsequent June update. We can take them one by one, or the floor to questions, given it's not the first time you've seen it, but I welcome Chair's steer on what you want to do.
I'll initially open up to questions and then we could take things through. Lee?
Can I ask for a point of clarification? There was a late email, 12 o'clock today, 1 o'clock today, saying there was an updated version of the paper. I read the previous version. I haven't had a chance to read the latest version. Could you talk me through what the changes are so I can understand what the differences are between the two documents? I would say just as a point of principle, if we're having papers updated in that way, it would be useful to have that. They might already be in there, I've just not had time to open it, so if I have, forgive me. But if they're not, they are, okay, thank you.
Yeah, on that, I've not even seen that email me, so I wasn't aware there was an updated paper, so.
Because of the timing on this, there's a slightly protracted process that happened, and less than ideal, so I agree, and apologise again for the late entry. The paper that was submitted yesterday, that I think majority have seen, there's very nominal changes, is my perspective today, but those changes were actually made to the cover report by the audit team. They weren't made by my office. And I think it was just to simplify and clarify exactly the history of the audit report and its arrival here, because we had that briefing and then we subsequently submitted the papers with an action update. So if you look at the action plan on the report itself, it's the action plan that was originally drafted in response to the audit report at the time. And we've since updated that. So I think the audit team were just trying to make clear what the submission of the audit report is the audit report as it was at the time in March, and that our update from the RPMO is an independent update based on the weeks that have passed and is dated June accordingly. And as I said, this was to reflect members' views that we should look at the action plan dates. So it's difficult for me to articulate exactly. I'd have to do a side-by-side comparison myself, but they were nominal changes that were sent up to the office to share.
Brian, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. So just to add, apologies on behalf of the partners, the original paper that was circulated to the agenda didn't include the original audit report. So what committee have in the pack that went out was the updated action, actions that are being progressed and proposed by COG. Should have been contained in that original paper was the audit report itself. So just to give the committee the assurance, the audit report that was already circulated to all members and you had the briefing on was the audit that was undertaken by Graham, who was on the call. That has not been amended in any way. The update that Neil was referring to is just a tweak to some of the wording in the covering report, basically the front couple of pages, not the actual content of the audit. So there's been no change to that at all. The substantive item that really is there for visibility and scrutiny and challenge back to us is agreed COG management actions, which is the bit that's in the original paper that was circulated for the agenda and still holds true. So none of that's been changed. Hopefully that helps to clarify.
So I was going to clarify exactly the same thing. So it was just that it was, in short, the omission was you didn't have sight of the audit paper at the same time as you were looking at the revised improvement plan. Yeah. So you've now got both, albeit the paper was circulated just today.
Okay, I will open up to questions then. So you don't have any questions? Well, if I go then to the recommendations, which are note in the updated action plan in response to the internal audit recommendations. Note that progress against the action plan will be monitored through the established governance arrangements and reported to the joint committee as appropriate. Delegate authority to the head of the RPMO to implement the approved actions in conjunction with partner organisations and relevant governance groups. And in relation to the action with the urgent business report, the recommendation was to note the content of the internal audit report at the partnership level and to be considered alongside the updated audit report action plan.
I did wonder, Chair, what exactly are the established governance arrangements that this would be getting reported through? Can you lay them out for me?
Yep, as per the existing governance framework that underpins the city region deal for Stirling and Clacks. So that is made up of the project and programme level boards that happen routinely. That then flows to Chief Officers Group and Joint Committee.
What I'm trying to understand is where does the accountability lie for delivery of each of these actions? Because obviously there's a response there and there's a targeted action completion date. But what I'm trying to understand here is where does responsibility sit for ensuring that these actions are undertaken? And how do we as a joint committee get assurance that these actions are being undertaken and have been undertaken?
Right.
So maybe I'll come in on that. So as you know, the governance arrangement is within the deal. The only decision-making body is this committee, joint committee. What the chief officer group and the RPMO are as there to deliver and then report back. So the responsibility for delivering these actions, councillor, is between ourselves, as called, and the RPMO. There's some of the elements are for the RPMO cutting across the, if you like, the remit of all three partners. Within the document it sets out, as you've highlighted, the owners. We will be tracking this at each of our COG meetings, as you would be expecting, and we will be reporting back to the September meeting on progress. You can see a lot of completion dates are by then anyway, but I can give you assurance on behalf of the partnership and COGs that this is already on our discussions, and it will continue to be on the discussions to track them through to completion, and you'll see that at the September meeting. Obviously, that then gets fed back into the internal audit team within council, and the expectation would be that this is then fed back into the individual partner organisations as well to pick up through their own internal processes, because there's internal audits required at partnership, individual partner level. This is obviously the partnership audit. So we would be feeding them back into the audit team, which in this case is the Stirling Council audit team, to confirm that those have been closed off.
Okay.
Sorry, I need to switch.
Oh, you can only have one on at a time, is that what it is? Anyways. Obviously in Stirling, everyone talks at once. Sorry. I suppose it's that thing, I mean, the recommendations that are in here, so I'm not disagreeing with. What I'm trying to kind of understand, some of them are more important, some of them are less important, and they're different ratings. What I want to make sure is that we are getting cited of the completion of these. Now, some of these we will be involved with, especially the benefits realisation and the one in relation to sort of financial reporting. Those are two specific ones that I do want to make sure that we are getting some level of involvement in. But I suppose what I want to do is make sure that even the lower recommendations are being done. Conversations are happening at the Chief Officers Group. I mean, if you start taking minutes at it, as is one of the recommendations here, then that'll help. But those conversations are happening and that they're effectively moving through the business. I would want to make sure that we're getting some sort of progress report on this at the September meeting. It feels like some of the due dates are after that September meeting, but I would have hoped that by the time we get to the September meeting, which I can't remember the date of it, then the 17th, thank you, Susan, then you're only 2 weeks away from quite a lot of deadlines. So I would hope when we get a report back on the actions in here at the September meeting, that we can get assurance that it's happening.
Thank you. Yep, absolutely. We'll do that. You're right. Some of the completion dates for these are at the end of that calendar month. They may well be completed naturally before the September meeting. If they're not, there'll be an update to that September meeting. Back to the earlier item, we said we were going to look at the dates. If the September meeting moves back to the first week of October, for example, because we're looking at the programme, then I would expect a lot will be complete by that point. But I can give you reassurance that COGs will be monitoring and they will be delivering, you will be updating in September.
I guess I have a question for the internal audit, because normally, if it was Club Manager, internal audit would have presented this. rather than, you know, kind of RPMO. So I just wondered whether anyone from the audit team had anything in particular they wanted to draw out or that they wanted to add.
Hi, afternoon everyone. I'm Graham Templeton. I'm the Audit Service Manager from Stirling Council, and I was the auditor for this review. I don't think there's anything I would want to draw out. Like we obviously had the members' briefing back at the end of March, and I done a run through the report. I run through the report then, so I don't propose to do that again. I suppose the only bits I would like to highlight are obviously just the assurance section in paragraph 2.1 of the report. You know, it sets out what the substantial assurance arrangements for the review, and the paragraphs that follow that at paragraph 2.3 onwards, they set out a summary of our findings and our overall conclusions, sort of thing. So I'd say, because I've done that at the briefing, I don't propose to go through that today, but it was really just to bring that to your attention. Thanks.
Do we have any further questions then on this item?
Can I just make a brief comment? And I suppose I'm just aware that we had an audit committee at Stirling Council this morning, and I think it went round the houses on this particular issue there as well. Members' briefings for people are not public discourse, and we've got to be careful with regards to ensuring and giving assurance to the public that this money is being well spent, etc. And I'm sure that hordes of people who are watching the proceedings of this committee are very interested in it, but there's an important principle at stake there, especially when you look at 3.39, and we've been around the houses. I don't want to belabor it, the issue around about benefits realisation, the fact that we haven't had that. There's also the there's also the issue with regards to the fact that we're supposed to have been doing these audits every 2 years and we haven't, and also the issue of assurance objective 4 regards to 3.58 in terms of the financial the checks in terms of the financial reporting. I do feel that these are things that are quite significant and need to be socialised publicly in terms of these are things that people are interested in. How often do we get asked the question, oh, what happened to the City Region deal? There's nothing being delivered, etc. You know, it's that thing where these things are actually, some of them are incredibly visible, like the cycleways that we've got in Stirling, and why do people moan about them? Some of them are far significantly less visible. Thinking about especially some of the stuff that's used by the university, which are tremendously important in terms of the deal, but perhaps people can't necessarily see them. They're not necessarily things that you can see. And it's that thing about making sure that we are open about what the money's been spent on, and that we're able to authoritatively, as the City Region Deal Joint Committee, say, we know what it's been spent on. It's been spent well. We have confidence that there will be benefits realised from this. They might not be immediate. Certain thing. We are able to do that, and I don't feel able to do that as of today, and I want to get to a situation where I do feel able to say that, and that's an important aspect of this. So I just wanted to make sure that's said, and that we're saying these things in a public forum, as it were.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, and I think I take comfort from the fact that the benefits realisation has kind of been noted as kind of high risk.
Yeah.
And that we do have actions in place to bring that forward to the September committee, which will be in public, and allowing these questions to be taken. But I agree with you. You know, there's certain meetings I go to, and all I get is what's happened to the city deal, and you know what's the money being spent on. So I do think we have to be, even if we're briefed, we do have to discuss things in public. And having just come from a session with the Audit Commission this morning, I'm very conscious that briefings that happen that are not public are maybe not always picked up on, particularly by auditors, etc. So we probably do need to be aware of that. You want to come in, Lee?
Yeah, no, thank you. Agree entirely. Two things may go in the comments. Brian and Neil around where we're getting to, and that would be that we follow the audit report result for all of the programs, projects we will have. Second element to it, which is where I think Neil was going, is that we've got this audit report. How do we know it's been actioned? Now, the way I think we would have approached that within the university, and assume it would be similar in council, is there would be a schedule of when that's brought back to this committee with an update on each of those actions and what's happened about it. We would normally do that, I think, on a 3 or 6 month cycle, but I'm assuming that's what was right, that by September you will come back with whatever the status, each of those actions are, follow that link.
Yeah, that's correct, we will, and give committee further assurance as part of that audit process, that will be fed back into Graham and the team in terms of the action for the fund, so that audit can confirm that that has been done, so you get that double assurance. You'll also see the visibility of the actions, because a lot, back to your point, Councillor Benny, a lot of the actions result in us doing more things through this committee, more visibility through things. So you'll see it in terms of us confirming what we put in place, through the audit team confirming as well, but also through the changes to what will come through to this committee and the visibility you'll see. So you see that, yeah, be rest assured there'll be either an update on progress or the finalised, here's what's been done in everything's closed off at the September council.
Yeah, I don't want to be excited about this. We want to excite them. So I think there is, we'll get there.
Absolutely. And to be fair,
It should probably start to form part of the annual report, etc., moving forward, where there's a bit more transparency. Because the annual report is the public-facing document and is probably the one that most members of the public might engage with, rather than committee papers. So, no. Okay. Okay, if we're fine with the recommendations and we agree them in the report, then shall nothing, we can move on to the final item on the agenda, which is confidential. Are we saying that we don't, if there are any members of the public, we'd be asking them to leave at this point? Under confidential, I don't know what the rules are, if it's a blue paper, etc.
Why is it confident? Why is it
Well,
confidential?
that's a good question.
I can come in. We were unsure whether to the public domain an unapproved report was suitable, so to take some caution, we marked it as private and confidential. But members are at liberty to release it if that's their preference.
Sorry.
So I'm just saying from a standard, kind of equivalent standing orders point of view, whilst it's a blue paper, it's not marked with the legal exemption. So I'm not quite sure what confidential means myself relative to standing orders. I don't know if the clerk can help.
Yeah, legally, it just couldn't be classified exempt. But you can classify it confidential. It just forbids the disclosure of our information to the public if there's information provided to the committee. And I think the information, like the basis is that it is a draft and that the is going to be provided in July. Neil, do you want to?
Yeah, and just to further, one of the points I was going to make under presentation is that the copy in the pack is still the copy that has been circulated to members previously as part of a briefing. The changes that have been requested by two of the members of Joint Committee are still in flight and to be approved by partners before being sent to Comms consultancy for update to the draft. So the draft that is in this pack is not consistent with members' feedback at this stage, and therefore it's a caveated approval we're seeking due to the timing of the Joint Committee and the obligation to publish by government set out in the heads of terms by July.
Okay, so Nikki advises that it's not being circulated as part of the public pack, but there are members of the public on the call. So how do we handle this? Do we have to ask them to leave at this point, or can we discuss it?
I'm assuming now you'd need to agree as a committee to hear it as private and then ask any members of the public, not voting members of the committee, to leave.
Yeah, there would first need to be an agreement vocalised and then thereafter. Based on what we've heard, do we feel this needs to be in private? I mean, I think we put draft reports up all the time for approval. We wouldn't necessarily hold them in private. Don't think there's anything in the report that is confidential. I think it's the point. The point is that that's not going to be the final report. So we're saying approve the Stirling and Manager City Region deal for publication, subject to final edits. How will we sign off what the final edits are?
So following past precedents of last year, you gave a caveated approval and delegated authority for me to make the changes requested by members, and any formatting or minimal change type corrections with the comms consultants that are helping us to produce it. What if members aren't comfortable with giving a caveated approval, then we have to consider how we get that, and members could give their preference on how they approve for the July deadline that's set out by government and the heads of terms.
Okay, first of all, I think we need to decide whether we're whether we are going to ask any members of the public to leave or whether we're going to just discuss this. I personally don't see that there's much need, but obviously that's up to committee members to decide. You know,
Could I perhaps, is that thing where it's like, I know, again, we're in this situation where we've had a briefing about this and we've had a significant discussion about it. I know there's a couple of edits and I think those were generally accepted. It feels like this doesn't need to be in private. It just feels a little bit weird that this has been an exempted item and it's been withheld. Draft reports come up all the time, and I think people understand that. I suppose, yeah, why can't we just agree this in terms of in public and say, yeah, go away and make these changes, because I don't think they were particularly controversial, the changes. These are the changes that you were talking about, I think.
yeah, Brian.
Chair, I don't know if this is appropriate with your standing orders and quite manager, but could I suggest we take a very quick recess?
Okay. So everyone is going to a quick recess?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We are flying to the